The millionaire came home earlier than usual, but what he saw when he walked through the door left him frozen. Within seconds, tears began to fall. Nothing, not all his wealth, had prepared him for that moment. The house on Waverley Lane used to breathe with life. Laughter echoed through the high ceilings, music spilled out from the sunroom, and the smell of freshly baked cookies wafted from the kitchen almost every afternoon. But now, the mansion stood still, heavy, quiet. Ethan Martinez sat at the edge of his king-sized bed, unmoving, still in the same shirt he'd worn the day before. The morning sun peeked through the blinds, casting long stripes across the floor, but he barely noticed. His eyes were fixed on the photo on his nightstand. Emily, her smile bright and alive, holding a giggling Sophia, while Mason clung to her shoulder. She was everything, and now she was gone. The accident had happened 3 months ago, but the days since blurred into one another, a dull loop of trying and failing to restore some sense of normalcy. Emily's absence echoed louder than any sound in the house. It crept through the hallways, soaked into the walls, and nestled deep in the hearts of everyone left behind. Downstairs, Mason, just 7 years old, sat silently at the breakfast table. He hadn't said a full sentence since the funeral. His cereal went soggy before he touched it. Across from him, 5-year-old Sophia stared into her glass of orange juice, her fingers tracing invisible shapes on the marble counter. Sophia cried most nights. Mason just disappeared. Not physically, but emotionally. He was always somewhere else, somewhere Emily still lived. Ethan had done everything money could buy, hired the best child therapists, brought in professional grief counselors, flown in a private chef to cook all their favorite meals. He'd bought the newest toys, the most advanced tablets, even an indoor treehouse. Nothing reached them, not even him. The staff tiptoed around the children, whispering in corners, afraid to upset the fragile air in the mansion. The latest nanny, a perfectly trained woman with glowing references, was already showing signs of burnout. And Ethan was drowning, in guilt, in exhaustion, in the cruel truth that no amount of wealth could fill the crater Emily had left behind. That afternoon, Ethan sat at the long kitchen island, a pile of resumes in front of him. The housekeeper had quit last week, said she couldn't stand watching the family unravel. A new one was needed, someone discreet, someone quiet, someone who wouldn't flinch at the sounds of crying behind closed doors. He barely looked up when the next candidate walked in. "Mr. Martinez?" a soft voice asked. Ethan raised his eyes to see a woman, maybe in her late 30s, standing awkwardly near the doorway. She wore a plain button-down shirt, black slacks, and her dark brown hair was pulled back into a tight bun. She looked clean, composed, and tired. But there was a calmness to her, like a quiet tree standing in a storm. "Yes, Rachel, right?" he said, motioning for her to sit. She nodded, taking the seat across from him, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "Do you have experience working in homes?" he asked, going through the motions. "I do," she said simply. "Good references?" "Yes." "Criminal background?" "Clean." He tapped the folder in front of him without opening it. "This house is complicated right now. My children are grieving. The atmosphere is not normal. You'll need to be invisible but present, quiet but available. Do you understand?" "I do." Something about her tone made him pause. She didn't seem intimidated by the size of the mansion or the weight in the room. She didn't smile politely or fidget nervously. She simply watched him, not with judgment, but with an understanding he didn't know he needed. "You'd start tomorrow," he said, "if that works for you." "It does," she replied. And just like that, Rachel became part of the house. The next morning she arrived early, slipping through the side entrance the way the housekeeper always had. No fuss, no announcement. She unpacked her own supplies, nothing fancy, just worn, reliable tools. and began cleaning, starting from the back of the house. She didn't ask questions, she didn't linger, but she noticed everything. The crayon marks on the baseboards in the hallway, the untouched stack of art supplies by the window, the corner of the living room where a tiny sock lay, still twisted from when it had been tossed weeks ago in a forgotten tantrum. She didn't touch these things yet, she just noted them. Like clues in a mystery no one else had bothered to solve. Later that day, Rachel passed by the playroom. The door was open just a crack. Inside, Mason sat curled in a beanbag, staring blankly at a silent tablet. Sophia lay on the rug nearby, her stuffed bear clutched tightly in her arms, whispering to it. Rachel paused unseen. She watched as Sophia whispered, "I miss Mommy. Do you think she misses me too?" To the bear. Rachel's eyes softened, but she didn't move, didn't interrupt. She let the moment pass, like a breeze through curtains. Then she moved on. By the end of the day, the kitchen sparkled. The floors were swept and mopped, the linens washed, the clutter cleared, but not the kind that mattered. The children's items, their memories, were left untouched. Respected. Ethan didn't even notice her at first, not until he opened the fridge and saw the labeled containers, the polished counters, and the folded dish towel, the one Emily used to hang the same way. His chest tightened, but he said nothing. Over the next few days, Rachel continued her quiet work. She hummed sometimes, soft lullabies, not in English, but gentle and soothing. One afternoon, as she wiped down the kitchen island, Sophia walked in, dragging her bear behind her. Rachel glanced up, gave the smallest smile, then returned to wiping. "Why are you singing?" Sophia asked. Rachel didn't stop. "It helps the silence feel less lonely," she answered, her tone light. Sophia stood there for a moment, then nodded slowly. She sat at the kitchen stool and watched Rachel finish cleaning. Minutes passed, but neither seemed to mind. Upstairs, Mason peeked from the railing, watching it all unfold. His fingers clutched the sketchbook he never showed anyone. He didn't say a word, but something about Rachel's presence pulled at him, not like the therapists or the nannies. She didn't try to fix them, she just let them be. And in that silence, something new began to breathe. Rachel moved through the house like a breeze through a sleeping garden, barely seen, never loud, but always felt. She kept her steps quiet on the marble floors and learned the rhythm of the mansion before anyone realized. She timed her cleaning around the children's routines, never vacuuming near nap time, never running water when Sophia was humming to her bear in the hallway. No one had to tell her how fragile the atmosphere was. She could feel it in the uneven silences, the sudden shifts in air when Ethan entered a room, or the way Mason glanced over his shoulder every time someone walked too close. What she noticed most were the small things everyone else missed. The crumpled sketches Mason hid under the living room couch cushions, dark pencil drawings of tall shadows, broken cars, and one recurring image of a woman's hand reaching down toward two small figures. She didn't touch them, but she remembered the patterns. They weren't just scribbles, they were grief in a child's language. She noticed how Sophia only whispered to her teddy bear at night, or when no one else was around. Little murmurs like, "Mommy's dress smelled like cake," or, "Do you think she can see me when I hide under the blanket?" Rachel never interrupted. She let the girl speak her heart in secret. But slowly, Rachel began speaking back, not directly, but through gestures. She folded Sophia's blanket the way Emily used to, diagonally, tucked under at the corners, like a butterfly's wings. She rearranged Mason's bed so the headboard faced the window, just like in the picture frames, still standing in the hallway, a subtle callback to the way Emily decorated the room. She began humming soft melodies while she cooked, lullabies her own mother used to sing, and others that Emily once sang in home videos Rachel had secretly watched online, researching the woman whose absence defined this family. She wasn't trying to replace her. That was impossible. but she could stitch pieces of her presence back into the quiet. One morning, Rachel was sweeping near the stairs when Sophia walked up, barefoot, her hair a tangled halo of curls. She stopped a few steps above and looked down. "Can you braid it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Rachel turned, surprised, gently setting the broom aside. "Of course," she said, motioning toward the kitchen stool. Sophia climbed up and sat still, clutching her bear tightly in her lap. Rachel ran her fingers gently through the messy strands, parting them with practiced hands. She didn't speak, and neither did Sophia, but there was something sacred in the silence between them, a trust forming, delicate but real. When the braid was done, Sophia turned toward her, nodding solemnly. "Thank you." "You're very welcome," Rachel replied with a warm smile. From the hallway above, Mason had watched the entire moment, hidden behind the banister. He didn't move, but when Rachel looked up in his direction, she didn't acknowledge him. She simply returned to sweeping. That small act of pretending not to see him felt like a gift, permission to observe without fear, to feel without being called out. Meanwhile, Ethan was watching too, though for entirely different reasons. He had noticed the shift in the air. His children were softer, eating more, sleeping more. Sophia had stopped screaming at night. Mason had been seen drawing at the kitchen table instead of hiding under it, and all of it seemed to orbit around Rachel. It made Ethan uncomfortable. She hadn't done anything wrong. If anything, she was doing everything right. But it unsettled him. How effortlessly she'd become a fixture in their lives, how little he actually knew about her. That evening, while the children played in the sunroom, Ethan stood by the kitchen counter as Rachel wiped down the sink. "You're good with them," he said, not looking up from his phone. Rachel paused. "Thank you." "Where did you learn that?" he asked, his tone neutral but pointed. She dried her hands slowly. "Life teaches you things. That's not an answer." Rachel met his eyes, calm and steady. "And it's not a question I'm required to answer." That caught him off guard. He narrowed his eyes slightly. "You're just a cleaner, but somehow you understand my children better than a team of licensed professionals. That's either a miracle or maybe I just see them," she interrupted softly. "Not as cases, not as problems to be fixed, just children who miss their mother." Ethan didn't reply. His jaw tightened slightly, but he said nothing more. Rachel nodded once and returned to her work. That night, a storm rolled through. Wind howled against the glass walls, and rain streaked down the windows in long silver trails. The house felt even larger in the dark, the thunder echoing off the marble like distant footsteps. Around midnight, Sophia's cries pierced the silence. Ethan bolted upright, rushing down the hallway, but as he reached her door, he stopped. Through the cracked doorframe, he saw Rachel sitting at the edge of Sophia's bed, gently stroking her hair. "It's okay, sweet girl," she whispered. "The thunder can't reach you here. Mummy used to say it was just the angels playing drums." "Loud, silly angels." Sophia sniffled, her small body still trembling. "I had the dream again." Rachel nodded. "I know, but you're safe. You're here, and I'm here. And we're going to breathe, remember? Like this." She began breathing slowly, holding the rhythm, guiding Sophia back into calm. Ethan stood frozen in the hallway. Those were Emily's words, word for word. He had heard her say that exact phrase dozens of times during bedtime storms, but no one else could have known that. No one. He backed away quietly, retreating into the hallway, a knot tightening in his chest. Was it just coincidence? Had Rachel read it somewhere? Or was there more to her than she claimed? His suspicion deepened, but so did something else. A reluctant sense of awe, because whatever the reason, his daughter was asleep again, peacefully. And in the silence that followed, Ethan realized that Rachel hadn't just entered his house. She had entered their grief, and somehow She wasn't drowning in it. The morning air was crisp, the kind that hinted at spring but still carried the chill of winter in its breath. Sunlight streamed into the kitchen through tall windows, bouncing off the granite counters and warming the floor tiles beneath bare feet. Rachel stood by the pantry, her fingers running lightly across the labels: flour, sugar, cocoa powder. Her eyes lingered on a handwritten card wedged between two spice jars, faded ink, slightly crumpled. It was the recipe she had copied from Emily's old blog, long since taken down, but preserved in a cache she'd found late one night when sleep wouldn't come. Emily's signature chocolate cake. Rachel had never met Emily, but she knew her. Knew her through the worn corners of framed photos, through the small rituals the children unconsciously repeated, and through the stories they never told, but carried in their silence. She took a deep breath and began pulling ingredients. Mason wandered into the kitchen first, still in his pajamas, his hair tousled and eyes wary. He paused at the doorway, unsure whether to stay. Rachel didn't speak. She just opened the cocoa container and set it gently on the counter with a wooden spoon beside it. Then came Sophia, her stuffed bear tucked under her arm. She climbed onto a stool without a word, watching Rachel's hands with quiet fascination. "Do you two want to help me make something?" Rachel asked softly. Sophia nodded instantly. Mason hesitated, then crossed the room slowly, taking the spoon in his hand like it might vanish. Rachel handed each of them an apron, plain white, with two long straps, and rolled up their sleeves. "It's chocolate cake," she said, smiling. "A special one." She didn't tell them it was Emily's. The process was messy and full of giggles. Sophia accidentally dumped half a cup of flour onto the floor and gasped like she'd broken something priceless. Mason laughed, really laughed, for the first time in what felt like forever. Rachel didn't scold. She just smiled, handed Sophia a cloth and said, "Flour on the floor means it's going to be delicious." The kitchen filled with movement. Eggs cracked, chocolate melted. Mason carefully stirred the mixture while Sophia insisted on tasting it every 3 seconds. Rachel showed them how to fold the batter, how to line the pans, and how to test for readiness with a toothpick. Then came the best part, licking the spoon. Rachel handed it to Mason first. He hesitated, then grinned, smearing chocolate on his nose. Sophia squealed and dipped her finger in the bowl. Laughter erupted, real, belly-deep laughter that echoed through the halls of the house and hit Ethan like a thunderclap. He had just come down the stairs, drawn by the strange scent of warmth and joy. He paused at the entrance to the kitchen, almost afraid to break the spell. There they were, his children, alive in a way he hadn't seen since the funeral, flour on their cheeks, chocolate smudged on the cabinets, and Rachel, at the center of it all, not directing but simply being with them. For a long moment, he didn't move. Mason noticed him first, and the laughter paused. Sophia turned her head. Ethan stepped into the room slowly, unsure of what to say. "What's going on in here?" "We made cake," Sophia beamed, holding out a gooey spoon. "The kind Mommy used to make." Ethan's chest tightened. He looked at Rachel, who met his eyes evenly. "It's almost ready," she said. Later that night, after the kids were bathed and in bed, Mason curled up with a sketchbook, Sophia fast asleep with her bear. Ethan stood alone in the living room, staring at the fireplace. He didn't turn when Rachel entered, but he spoke. "How did you know?" She didn't ask what he meant. "I found one of her old recipes," she said quietly. "I thought it might bring something back." He turned to face her. "You keep doing that, bringing things back, things even I didn't know how to hold on to." Rachel crossed her arms loosely, her expression unreadable. Ethan stepped closer. "Who are you, really?" There was no anger in his voice now, just the exhaustion of a man who had lost too much too fast and couldn't make sense of the one thing that seemed to be working. Rachel took a long breath. "I have a degree in child development," she said finally, "and a specialization in psychopedagogy. I used to teach small children mostly. I loved it." Ethan blinked, stunned. "Then why—" "I left," she interrupted. "I had to. My son and I were in a dangerous situation. His father—" She hesitated. "Let's just say the system didn't protect us. So we ran. I couldn't keep teaching without exposing us. Cleaning jobs are quiet. They don't ask too many questions." Ethan was silent. "I didn't come here to manipulate anyone," she added. "I just saw pain. Pain I've known too well. And I knew that no one else was speaking the children's language." "And what language is that?" he asked. "Grief," she said. "It has its own words, its own silence." Ethan lowered his gaze. "I'm sorry for what you went through." "I'm not asking for pity," she said. "Only trust." There it was again, that grounded, unflinching presence. He couldn't buy it, couldn't control it. But maybe, just maybe, he could respect it. Rachel turned to leave. "Oh," she added, pausing at the door. "Sophia wanted me to give you this." She held out a small plate, covered in foil. Ethan took it, peeled back the edge, and saw a square of chocolate cake. A folded napkin underneath read, in Sophia's handwriting, "Mommy used to make it like this. I love you, Daddy." Ethan sat down at the counter and took a bite, and for the first time in months, the taste of something real, bittersweet and full of memory, filled the empty space in his chest. The mansion, once filled with an unbearable silence, had begun to shift. It wasn't loud now, not yet, but it breathed differently. The air no longer felt heavy with grief. There were signs of life everywhere. Half-colored drawings left on the kitchen table, cereal bowls actually emptied, and laughter echoing faintly from upstairs bedrooms. Rachel had become a part of that rhythm. Sophia followed her from room to room like a shadow with pigtails. Mason no longer hid when people came into the room. He'd sit beside Rachel on the floor, quietly sketching while she folded laundry or tidied up. Sometimes he'd hand her a pencil, and together they'd color without speaking a word. It was enough. Mealtimes had changed, too. The children ate full portions now, sometimes asking for seconds. They told stories at dinner, even if they were just little things. A dream Sophia had, a new idea Mason had for a comic strip. Sleep came easier, and nightmares came less often. Ethan noticed it all. At first, it felt like a blessing. The guilt that had hollowed out his chest began to recede. He found himself working from home more often, staying in the kitchen after dinner, sitting on the stairs just to listen to the children giggle, but somewhere deep down, an unfamiliar emotion crept in. Jealousy. Not the romantic kind, something more primal. His children were healing, but not because of him. They ran to Rachel when they were scared. They laughed louder when she was near. She knew their moods, their needs, their triggers, and though Ethan had always prided himself on solving problems, he couldn't fix this one. He wasn't sure how to feel about the woman who had succeeded where he had failed. The tension didn't go unnoticed. The nanny, a polished, sharp-eyed woman named Brooke, had been watching Rachel closely. She'd sensed her fading relevance in the household and didn't take kindly to it. Her words became colder, her movements more strategic. One afternoon, while Ethan worked in his home office, Brooke appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Martinez," she said, carefully respectful, "I think there's something you should know." Ethan looked up. "What is it?" "It's about Rachel," she said. "I did some digging. She's not exactly who she says she is." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "What do you mean?" "She has no verifiable references, no full employment history. You trust her with your children, but she's a complete unknown. Don't you find that concerning?" He folded his arms. "She's been nothing but respectful. The children love her." That's what worries me, Brooke said. People who want something often get close first. Maybe she's manipulating them. Or you. Ethan sat back in his chair, her words turning in his mind like smoke. Later that evening, he watched from the hallway as Mason and Sophia sat with Rachel, assembling a puzzle. Their heads leaned together, hands moving in sync, quiet joy in their eyes. And still, Brooke's voice echoed in his mind. People who want something often get close first. He didn't want to believe it, but doubt is a seed that grows fast when watered by fear. The next morning, he asked Rachel to step into the sitting room. I think we need to reassess your role, he said, avoiding her eyes. You've been doing more than what you were hired for. Rachel tilted her head. And that's a problem? It's not appropriate. You've grown too close. She blinked, caught off guard. You're saying I should stop helping your children because I care too much? I'm saying boundaries matter, he said, though the words felt brittle even as he said them. Rachel stood still for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. If that's what you want. That night Mason didn't speak at dinner. He pushed his plate away, untouched. Sophia burst into tears over a missing fork and refused to come down for bedtime stories. By morning, things had unraveled. Mason wouldn't get out of bed. Sophia hid behind the couch and wouldn't come out, even when Ethan tried to bribe her with pancakes. Brooke hovered nearby, but the children recoiled from her touch. The house, so recently alive again, had returned to its frozen state, like warmth had been sucked from its walls. That evening, while tidying Mason's room, Ethan noticed a piece of paper sticking out from under the boy's pillow. It was a drawing, crayons on notebook paper, rough and hurried, but unmistakable. It was Mason, standing in a garden, his hand holding tightly to Rachel's. Above them, a smiling sun. In the corner, a small cloud with the word Mommy written inside. Ethan stared at it, his throat tightening. He sat on the edge of the bed, eyes stinging. He had made a mistake. Downstairs, Rachel was in the laundry room, folding the last load she thought she'd ever do here. Rachel, Ethan said, appearing in the doorway, voice low, I need to apologize. She looked up, guarded. I let someone plant doubt where there shouldn't have been any, he said. I forgot that trust is earned with actions, not resumes. Rachel's expression softened just slightly. They need you, he added. I need you, not just to clean, not just to help, but to be here with them. He stepped forward, placing Mason's drawing on the folding table. I want you to stay, officially, as their caregiver, their teacher, whatever you're willing to be. Rachel stared at the drawing, then back at Ethan. Her voice was quiet, but steady. I'm not a substitute. I know, he said. You're something else entirely. That night, Sophia crawled into Rachel's lap with a storybook. Mason sat beside them, his sketchbook open again. And Ethan, sitting in the doorway, finally allowed himself to believe. Maybe families weren't just born. Maybe sometimes they were chosen, in the spaces between grief and grace. Change didn't arrive with a bang in the Martinez home. It came in whispers. A soft murmur of laughter during dinner, the creak of Mason's bedroom door as he tiptoed in to say goodnight to Rachel, the rustle of pages as Sophia read out loud with growing confidence. Rachel didn't just restore routine, she reintroduced rhythm. Family dinners became a ritual, no phones, no tablets, just food, shared stories, and warmth. One night, Mason announced that broccoli didn't taste like green dirt anymore. Sophia, after finishing her plate, declared she was going to become a chef, or a fairy, or both. Even Ethan began to feel lighter. He no longer hovered outside the children's doorways, unsure of how to step in. Rachel pulled him in, gently but consistently. She passed him books during story time, asked him to stir the pasta, gave him small tasks that led to big moments. But the biggest shift came one morning when Rachel stood outside Emily's old study. The door had been closed since the funeral. Ethan saw her standing there, hand resting on the doorknob. "You don't have to go in," he said quietly. "I'm not going in without you," she replied. Reluctantly, he nodded and opened the door. The room was exactly as Emily had left it. Her books still lined the shelves, her favorite throw draped over the reading chair. A faint scent of vanilla still lingered in the air. Rachel stepped inside carefully, eyes scanning the space. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "And it still feels like her." Ethan swallowed hard. "I haven't touched anything." "I think it's time," Rachel said. "Not to erase her, but to let her love continue in a different form." He looked at her, confused. "This room could become a place for the kids," she continued. "An art studio, a space to create, to imagine. Emily loved that part of them, didn't she?" Ethan glanced at the paintings on the wall, the unfinished scrapbook on the desk. Emily's legacy wasn't in the furniture. It was in the life she had nurtured, the family she'd loved. "I don't want to feel like I'm replacing her," he said quietly. "You're not," Rachel replied. "You're allowing her memory to grow, instead of trapping it in a room no one enters." That night, they started cleaning the space together. Rachel removed the old office supplies while Mason and Sophia helped sort paints and brushes. Ethan took down the heavy drapes and let the sun flood in for the first time in months. They painted the walls a soft sky blue. Sophia suggested adding clouds, real ones. So Rachel taught them how to sponge paint with white acrylic. It became the heart of the home. Every afternoon the children disappeared into the imagination room, drawing, painting, telling stories. Mason began working on a comic series, The Girl with the Bear Shield, starring a brave little girl who looked suspiciously like his sister. Sophia declared herself the official director of wall art and hung her glittery creations with pride. In quiet moments, Ethan found himself watching Rachel with new eyes. She wasn't just healing the children, she was rebuilding him too. One evening, while they were organizing books for the new art shelves, Rachel opened up more than she ever had. "I used to dream about starting a school," she said, running her fingers along the spine of a picture book. "Not just any school, one where emotions were part of the curriculum, where kids could learn math and reading, but also how to talk about sadness, anger, joy, how to listen, how to feel safe." Ethan leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "You ever get close?" She shook her head. "I had a rough start, got into the wrong relationship. I stayed too long, lost too much. When I finally left, I couldn't afford to chase dreams anymore. I had to survive." He didn't speak for a moment. Then he said, "What if that dream didn't have to die?" Rachel looked up. "I've got an old commercial building, barely used, office space, classrooms already set up. It's just sitting there." He paused. "We could renovate it, start small, a pilot program." She stared at him, stunned. "You'd do that?" she asked. "I'd do that with you," he said, "as partners." Rachel blinked back the emotion that rose quickly to her throat. For so long she'd carried her potential like a secret, a beautiful burden no one else saw. And now, here was someone not just seeing it, but offering to bring it to life. That night, while the kids slept and the house hummed with quiet peace, Rachel sat on the couch sketching ideas on a legal pad, names for the school, curriculum ideas, even floor plans. Ethan joined her, adding thoughts of his own. It was the first time in years he'd dreamed without guilt attached to it, but peace never lingers unchallenged. 3 days later, as Rachel stepped out onto the porch to bring in a package, she saw the envelope. No stamp, no address, just a name. Rachel, written in rushed handwriting. She opened it slowly. Inside was a photo. Her and her son, taken years ago in a park she hadn't visited in over 5 years. The note beneath it read, "Found you." Her hands trembled. Ethan found her in the kitchen, staring at the photo. Her face had gone pale. "Rachel? What is it?" She said nothing, just handed him the envelope. He read the note, his jaw clenching instantly. "Is it him?" She nodded. "I'll handle it," Ethan said. "He won't come near you. Or the kids." But Rachel's eyes were far away now, not with fear, with memories, with the bruises she'd hidden, the police reports no one read, the shelters, the shame. She had built a new life here, fragile, full of hope, but still unfinished. And now the past had come knocking. Only this time she wasn't alone. The morning was unusually quiet, not the heavy silence of grief that once haunted the halls, but a lighter kind, the kind that follows peace. Sophia was in the art room, painting with glitter she definitely wasn't supposed to use on the walls. Mason sat in the corner, sketching with focus, tongue tucked between his teeth. Rachel sat nearby, organizing a bin of crayons, humming softly. Ethan stood in the doorway, coffee in hand, just watching. This calm, creative chaos was what home had started to feel like again. Until the knock came. Not a gentle tap, a pounding, deliberate fist against the gate. The sound jolted everyone. Rachel stood slowly, the color draining from her face. She walked to the window and peeked through the curtain. Her breath caught. It was him, tall, broad, still wearing that same crooked smirk that had once made her feel like she was nothing. Her ex, the man she'd fled from, the reason she'd hidden her identity, her past, her dreams. He had found her. "Rachel!" His voice boomed from outside the gate. "You think you can hide behind these rich people? You think they're going to protect you?" The children peeked around the corner, wide-eyed and frozen. Ethan appeared at her side a moment later. "Who is that?" he asked, but one look at Rachel's face answered his question. Without a word, Ethan stormed outside, fists clenched. "Leave! Now!" Ethan ordered, his voice sharp and unshakable. Her ex laughed. "This your new life? Living off some grieving billionaire? That what you do now?" "I said leave," Ethan growled, "before I call the police." Rachel watched from the window as the man raised his voice again, shouting slurs and accusations. The children flinched. Sophia began to cry. Mason pulled her behind him. Then something shifted in Ethan, not rage, but something deeper, protective, final. He pulled out his phone and dialed, giving the security company clear, cold instructions. Within minutes, 2 guards appeared at the gate and escorted the man off the property. Ethan followed with a call to his lawyer. A restraining order was filed before dinner, but the emotional damage had already rippled. Later that night, Rachel sat at the edge of her bed, shaken. She hadn't eaten. She hadn't spoken much. Her past had roared back to life and threatened everything she'd built. She was packing. Ethan knocked lightly and stepped in. "You don't have to go," he said. Rachel looked up, her eyes glassy. "I do, for their sake, if he comes back." "He won't get close," Ethan said. "Not again. I've hired full-time security, the gate's locked, cameras installed. I've got people watching every angle." "I can't put them at risk," she whispered. Ethan knelt in front of her. "You're not. You've done nothing but protect them, love them. You belong here." She shook her head. "I don't want them to live in fear because of me." Just then, a soft knock came at the door. Mason stood there, holding something behind his back. Sophia peeked from behind him. "Are you leaving?" Mason asked. Rachel didn't answer. He stepped forward and handed her a drawing. It was their family. Him, Sophia, Rachel, Ethan, all standing in front of the mansion. Above their heads, in uneven kid handwriting, were the words, "Safe with you." Rachel's breath hitched. Sophia climbed onto the bed beside her. "Don't go. Please, we're not scared with you here." Rachel turned to Ethan, overwhelmed. "They've already lost one mother." Ethan looked at her, steady and sure. "And they gained you. That's not replacing someone, that's healing." She paused, her eyes searching his. "You don't run anymore," he said gently. "You're not alone now." In the days that followed, something remarkable happened. Rachel stayed. The children clung to her more tightly than ever. They helped her repaint the art room, this time with even more glitter. She returned to her rhythm, but something had changed. She was no longer a guest in the house. She was part of its foundation. Ethan made it official. One evening after dinner, he gathered everyone in the living room. "I want to make an announcement," he said, with Mason and Sophia curled up on either side of Rachel. He looked at her. "Rachel, you're not just a caregiver or a teacher. You're a partner, not just in this home, but in something bigger." He handed her a folder. Inside were blueprints, business permits, and a title page that read, "The Heartwood Academy, a school for emotional and academic growth." Her name was listed as co-founder. Rachel stared at it, stunned. "You actually did it?" "We're doing it," Ethan said. "Together." She smiled, not the small, polite one he'd seen so many times, but a real, unguarded smile. The kind that said she believed again, in herself, in the future. That night, as Rachel tucked the children in, Sophia whispered, "You're our forever person." Rachel kissed her forehead. "You're mine too." And Ethan, standing in the doorway, realized something he hadn't wanted to face before. Rachel wasn't Emily's replacement. She was Rachel, her own strength, her own story, her own heart, and maybe, just maybe, she was exactly what they had all been missing. The sun rose over the Martinez estate with a kind of golden promise. The mansion's once muted grounds now buzzed with color and movement. Rows of white tents lined the trimmed lawn. Balloons in soft pastels danced in the breeze, and laughter, the honest, unfiltered kind, echoed across the gardens. It was opening day for Heartwood Academy. What had begun as an idea scribbled on Rachel's notepad had become a vibrant, living reality. The pilot program had filled quickly, not with elite applicants, but with kids from all walks of life. Children whose families had faced hardship, loss, instability, the very kids Rachel had once dreamed of reaching. Now, they were here. Running across the yard, decorating cupcakes at the craft table, sitting in a circle, painting with Mason and Sophia in the new mobile art studio. Rachel stood near the gate, watching it all unfold, her heart full and a little overwhelmed. "You did this," Ethan said, stepping beside her, sunglasses in hand. She turned to him. "We did." He smiled. "Still, I've never seen this place look like joy." "Because it's never been asked to hold this much before," she said, her voice soft. The school's name was proudly displayed on a banner across the main tent, Heartwood Academy, where emotions matter. Near the stage, Sophia tugged at the hem of her dress, holding a small index card. Rachel crouched down beside her. "You okay?" she asked. Sophia nodded, serious. "I'm just nervous." "You don't have to say anything if you don't want to." Sophia looked up, her eyes clear. "No, I want to." Moments later, Ethan stepped up to the small microphone to welcome the crowd. He introduced the mission behind the school, the vision he and Rachel had built together, and how every child deserved a space where they were not just educated, but understood. Then he motioned to Sophia. She walked up to the mic, barely tall enough to reach it. Mason gave her a quick thumbs up from the front row. Sophia took a breath. "This school is special," she began, "because it helps kids feel brave, even when they're sad, even when they miss someone." She paused, glanced at Rachel, and smiled. "I used to cry a lot. I thought maybe I'd never be happy again. But then someone came into our house and helped fix the sad parts. She didn't make them go away. She just helped them grow into something else." She held up her card, read the final line slowly. "This is where hearts get fixed." The crowd fell into a silence that carried weight, not out of formality, but because they felt the truth of her words. Rachel wiped her eyes. Ethan reached over, gently took her hand, and squeezed it. As the crowd dispersed into celebration, dancing, games, storytelling circles, Ethan pulled Rachel aside. "I've been thinking about something," he said, nervously adjusting his collar. "For a while now." She looked at him, playful suspicion in her smile. "What is it?" "This house, it's always been too big, too quiet, until you," Rachel chuckled lightly. "Until your kids." "No," he said, "until you." He took a breath, then stepped closer. "I know you've always hesitated. You didn't want to take up space. But I want you to know something." He reached into his pocket and handed her a folded paper, an official amendment to the house deed. Her name on it. "This is your home now, too. Not as an employee, not even as a guest." Rachel stared at it, speechless. "I want you and your son, if and when he's ready, to move in permanently." She looked up, emotions crashing into each other all at once. "I'm not trying to recreate the past," Ethan continued. "I don't want to replace what was, but I do want to build something new, with you." Tears welled in Rachel's eyes, and she nodded slowly. "Okay," she whispered. "Yes." That night, long after the tents came down and the cake was gone, the family gathered in the backyard under string lights. Sophia danced barefoot across the grass. Mason told jokes from a self-made stage built out of crates. Rachel sat in a chair watching them, laughter lighting up her face. Ethan joined her, handing her a glass of lemonade. "Do you realize what you did?" She smiled. "No, but I know what we did." They clinked glasses. From the outside, it looked like a family party. But it was more than that. It was proof that broken hearts could mend, that healing didn't mean forgetting, that sometimes the most powerful love stories begin after loss, in the quiet places where new roots grow. And this family, beautifully imperfect and born from pain, had found a way to bloom again. Sometimes the smallest moments change the biggest lives. If this story moved you, leave a like and subscribe for more.